Before we go any further, if you care about real history, real materials, and the kind of knowledge that actually mattered when lives were on the line, subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who still believes history should be learned from primary evidence, not internet myths. This channel exists for people who take survival, material science, and historical truth seriously. Now, let me hook you properly, because what you're about to learn is not trivia. During World War II, aircrews flying over the North Sea had minutes, sometimes seconds, before cold water killed them. Rubberized rain gear cracked, oilskin was heavy and unreliable, and canvas tarps soaked through. The British military needed something radically different. What they developed wasn't plastic, wasn't synthetic, and wasn't fragile. It was a fabric so tightly engineered that water physically could not pass through it once wet. It weighed less than a tarp, breathed better than rubber, and survived years of abuse. And today, most people don't even know it existed. This is the story of the World War II fabric that outperformed modern tarps long before nylon ever showed up. Why World War II forced a rethink of waterproof materials. By the early 1940s, the limitations of existing waterproof gear were brutally obvious. Rubber coatings peeled and froze, oil-treated fabrics rotted and smelled, heavy tarpaulins protected equipment but exhausted soldiers and pilots who had to carry them. For aircrew in the Royal Air Force, exposure was not hypothetical. A downed pilot in icy water needed clothing that blocked wind, resisted water, and still allowed sweat to escape without turning the body into a steam bath. The British solution, well, it came from textile engineers rather than chemists. Instead of just coating fabric to make it waterproof, they actually redesigned the fabric itself. The goal was to create a material that would seal itself when exposed to water, yet remain breathable when dry. And, this wasn't just marketing language. It was pure physics. The fabric that sealed itself when it truly mattered most. The material was called Ventile, a densely woven, long-staple cotton developed specifically for wartime survival. Each thread was spun from extremely high-quality cotton fibres and woven so tightly that, honestly, the dry fabric looked almost smooth to the touch. But the real genius, well, that only showed itself when the fabric got wet. Cotton fibres, you see, swell when they absorb moisture. In Ventile, that swelling closed the microscopic gaps between threads, forming a water-resistant barrier without any coating at all. This meant, quite simply, no cracking in cold weather, no chemical degradation, and importantly, no delamination over time. Unlike tarps, which tend to trap moisture underneath, Ventile still allowed a bit of vapour to escape. Pilots wearing immersion suits made from this fabric could survive longer in freezing seas because their bodies stayed dry without overheating during exertion. And this wasn't just some experimental gear. It was actually issued during World War II, because it worked. So, why did Ventile outperform tarps out in the field? Well, a tarp relies mostly on its thickness and special coatings to block water, you see. Ventile, on the other hand, relied on its unique structure. That difference made it lighter, quieter, and a whole lot more flexible. A Ventile garment or cover could be folded into just a fraction of the space needed for a canvas tarp, and importantly, it could be deployed without any noise at all, which really mattered both in military situations and when you're trying to survive out there. Durability was honestly another big advantage. Tarps tend to fail at the seams, eyelets, and where the coatings wear off. Ventile, though, only failed if it was physically torn, and even then the fabric had this knack for resisting the damage from spreading. A small puncture wouldn't unravel the material the way some of the synthetic weaves do today. For survivalists, the lesson is pretty clear. Waterproofing doesn't require plastic. It actually requires a good understanding of how fibres behave. Now, how does all this knowledge fit into modern survival and field use? Well, if you're building or choosing your gear today, the Ventile principle still holds true. Dense natural fibres just behave differently from coated synthetics. For example, a tightly woven cotton anorak or shelter panel can, in fact, outperform those cheap nylon tarps in cold, wet environments, where condensation can really kill both your comfort and your morale. One practical application is shelter design. A Ventile-style cotton bivvy or ground cloth will resist rain while reducing internal condensation compared to plastic-backed tarps. Another application is clothing. Layering a dense cotton outer shell over wool insulation replicates the same system World War II pilots relied on. Moisture management through material choice, not gimmicks. Even repairs are simpler. A needle and thread restore function without special tapes or heat sealing. In long-term survival scenarios, that matters more than advertised waterproof ratings. Why this fabric disappeared from mainstream use? Ventile didn't vanish because it failed. It vanished because synthetics were cheaper to mass-produce and easier to market. Nylon and polyester could be coated quickly, coloured easily, and sold as modern. But coatings degrade. Fibres don't forget how they behave. Today, Ventile is still manufactured in limited quantities for extreme cold weather gear, polar expeditions, and specialist outdoor clothing. It remains expensive because, well, quality cotton and slow weaving cannot be rushed. That cost reflects reality, not branding. What WWII materials still teach us today? The deeper lesson here is not nostalgia, it's humility. Engineers in the 1940s solved life-or-death problems with material science, not slogans. They understood fibres, moisture, airflow, and failure modes. They designed for worst-case conditions, not average consumers. When you evaluate survival gear today, ask the same questions they did. What happens when it's soaked for hours? What happens in freezing wind? What fails first? The answers often point away from disposable synthetics and back toward principles proven under fire. If this kind of history matters to you, if you value knowledge that was earned the hard way and still holds up, subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who respects real research, and keep this material alive. History only stays useful if we remember why it worked.